My wealthy grandfather adopted me after my parents abandoned me at the age of 13. 15 years later, they showed up with smug smiles at the will reading, expecting to receive millions of dollars until my grandfather's lawyer revealed the truth that made their faces turn pale. But the story doesn't start there. It begins from the days when I was still a boy, living in a small, dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of Baltimore, where happy memories intertwined with pain that gradually consumed me. I am Kieran Murphy, and back then, I was only 10 years old, living with my father Patrick and mother Fiona in a cramped two-bedroom apartment, where the walls were stained with cracks and the wooden floor creaked with every step. The apartment was in the suburbs, where low-rise buildings huddled together and the rumbling of trucks from the nearby highway echoed through the night. My father, Patrick, was a tall man with a scruffy goatee and rough, calloused hands from repairing cars. He ran a junkyard on the edge of the city, where he spent hours tinkering under car hoods, the smell of oil and gasoline soaking into his clothes and sometimes even into our dinners. But Dad wasn't always there. He was addicted to gambling, and on the nights he disappeared, I lay in bed, listening to Mom pacing back and forth in the kitchen, her voice whispering prayers or curses. I wasn't sure. My mother, Fiona, used to be a beautiful woman with long red hair and a warm smile that could chase away any darkness. She worked as a babysitter at home, turning the living room into a play area with cheap plastic toys and old rugs. On good days, she would sing Irish folk songs she learned from her grandmother, her voice sweet as honey, and the kids would giggle. But depression had turned her into a shadow. On bad days, she sat blankly in the armchair, her eyes glazed over staring out the window, where Baltimore's rain pattered against the glass. She forgot to feed the kids, forgot to clean, and the work gradually failed. Parents pulled out, leaving us with piling bills and suffocating silence. Even so, our family once had ordinary moments, fragments of happiness that I clung to like a lost child. On Friday nights, we gathered to watch movies on the old TV. Mom making popcorn in the cast-iron skillet, the smell of hot butter filling the house. Dad would laugh loudly at comedies, slapping his thigh, and I sat between them, feeling safe, like being embraced. Camping trips in the nearby park were paradise. Dad taught me to light a fire with wet matches. Mom told stories about the stars twinkling in the city's pitch-black sky. And Christmas. Oh, Christmas. Mom made waffles with homemade syrup, the scent of cinnamon and brown sugar mingling, and we opened presents under the cheap fake tree. In those moments, I thought our family was perfect, despite the moldy apartment and the occasional power cuts from unpaid bills. But everything started to change when I turned 11. Tension crept in like a slow-acting poison. Dad came home later, reeking of alcohol and tobacco on his shirt. Mom smiled less, her eyes red-rimmed after arguments. I heard them whispering in the bedroom, Dad's voice gruff. "Fiona, we can't go on like this. Where's the money?" Mom replied, her voice trembling. "You think I don't know? If this continues, we'll have to send Kieran to someone else to take care of him." I lay in bed pretending to sleep, but my heart pounded like a drum. Did they see me as a burden? I started wondering what I'd done wrong. Was it my poor grades at school? Or because I often asked for toys? Guilt clung to me, making me withdraw more, speak less, and try to be better so they wouldn't argue. By the time I was 12, the arguments became more frequent, like Baltimore's summer storms, sudden and fierce. Dad yelled about bills, Mom cried about loneliness. I sat in my room, hugging my knees, listening to dishes shattering. Once Dad punched the wall, leaving a hole that we covered with an old newspaper. Mom started taking pills, small white ones from the doctor, but they only made her more tired. I tried to help, cleaning the house, cooking simple dinners from pasta, even going to the store for Mom when she was bedridden. But it was useless. They looked at me with distant eyes as if I were part of the problem, not the solution. Then one morning, right when I turned 13, everything collapsed completely. I woke up later than usual because the night before I'd stayed up late reading to forget the arguing. Baltimore's weak sunlight filtered through the tattered curtains, shining on the dusty floor. The apartment was eerily quiet. No clattering from Mom in the kitchen making coffee, no grumbling from Dad about his missing shoes. I rubbed my eyes and called softly, "Mom? Dad?" My voice echoed in the empty space like an echo in a cave. My heart started beating faster. I stepped out of my room, barefoot and cold on the wooden floor, sensing the abnormality. No smell of coffee, no morning radio that Mom usually turned on. On the kitchen table, amid the dirty dishes from last night, I saw a white scrap of paper, Mom's scribbled handwriting. She always wrote hastily like that. I picked it up, my hands shaking. "Kieran, we can't endure it anymore. Your grandfather Henry will take care of you. Sorry." The words danced before my eyes. Sorry? They were sorry for abandoning me? For leaving me alone in this apartment with bills and fear? I read it over and over, hoping it was a dream, but the crumpled paper in my hand was too real. I ran through the house, flinging open closet doors. Their suitcases were gone, some of Mom's favorite clothes too. Dad's shoes, the old leather boots, lay lonely under the bed like a final reminder. Panic surged like a wave. I called Mom from the old landline phone, but it rang endlessly with no answer. Dad's number was the same. "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable." I slumped onto the kitchen floor, back against the humming fridge, tears streaming down my cheeks. Why? Was I so bad that they had to leave? Images of Mom hugging me, Dad laughing heartily, now cut into my heart like knives. I thought about their promises. "We'll be fine, son." Promises now shattered like glass. The following hours passed in a blur. I tried to eat something, a dry slice of bread from the cupboard, but my throat was choked. A knock at the door startled me. Mrs. Carter, the landlady, a plump woman with a shrill voice, coming to collect rent. "Kieran, where are your parents? This month's rent is late." She looked around the empty apartment, eyes narrowing suspiciously. I stammered, They're gone." She sighed, her face a mix of pity and annoyance. "What do you mean gone? Where?" "I'll give you 3 days to contact them, or I'll have to call the police. Can't leave you here alone." She left, leaving me with even greater fear. 3 days? What would I eat? Where would I sleep if they evicted me? I couldn't wait. I needed help. I remembered Ms. Wilson, the school counselor, a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile and thick glasses. She'd once said, "If you need anything, come to me." I gathered my courage and called from the landline, my voice trembling. "Ms., my parents have left. I don't know what to do." Ms. Wilson came right away, her old car pulling up with a screech. She hugged me, the vanilla perfume comforting, and called Child Protective Services. "Everything will be okay, Kieran," she whispered. But I didn't believe it. My world had crumbled. The days that followed were a whirlwind of strangers. I was taken to the social services office, a gray room with old wooden desks and the smell of musty paperwork. A worker named Erin, with a forced smile and her hair in a high bun, asked me a ton of questions. "Where did your parents go? Do you have any relatives?" I told her about my parents, my voice faltering as I recalled the note. When asked about family, I only remembered grandfather Henry, the one Dad rarely mentioned, just saying he was a rich but cold and stingy old man who had disowned Dad when he was 18. "He's somewhere." "I don't know," I whispered. Erin nodded, made calls, and I sat there, hands clasped tightly, waiting for a miracle I didn't dare hope for. Then my grandfather appeared like a ghost from the past. I heard the clacking of leather shoes on the linoleum floor before I saw him. Henry Murphy strode in, tall with silver hair, an expensive gray suit hugging his sturdy frame, his face stern as if carved from granite. He didn't smile, didn't hug me, just looked me up and down with sharp blue eyes, as if appraising a piece of furniture in his store. "Kieran," he said, his voice deep and decisive, echoing in the room. "I am your grandfather. Come with me." Erin nodded approvingly, but I hesitated. Who was this man? Why had he come? But I had no choice. I grabbed my backpack, containing a few shabby clothes, my copy of The Hobbit and Mom's note, and followed him. As we left the office, sitting in the sleek black car, I looked out the window, trying to hold back tears. Baltimore receded behind us, the familiar streets blurring in my vision. I didn't know who Grandfather Henry was, didn't know where he would take me or what my life would become. But one thing I knew for sure. My parents had abandoned me, and now I was left with this stranger, with his emotionless gaze and an uncertain future ahead. The journey lasted for hours, but to me, it felt like an endless nightmare. This luxurious Mercedes, with its soft leather seats and faint woody scent, was completely alien compared to my father's old pickup truck, where I used to sit in the back, the wind whipping through my messy hair. Grandfather Henry sat beside me in the back seat, but the distance between us was as vast as an ocean. He didn't say a word, just flipped through a leather notebook, jotting down something with an expensive fountain pen. I stole glances at him, trying to find a familiar sign. Perhaps a facial feature like my father's or a warm gesture, but there was nothing. His face was angular, his silver hair neatly trimmed, and his deep blue eyes seemed to calculate everything around him. I wondered what he was thinking about me, the grandson who had suddenly appeared from the ruins of his son's life. The scenery outside the window gradually changed. From the narrow, noisy streets of Baltimore with their gray concrete buildings and blaring horns, we sped onto wide highways, where lush green trees lined both sides and the sky seemed higher. I realized we were leaving Maryland, heading north, perhaps to Virginia or Pennsylvania. I wasn't sure, as I'd never traveled this far. My stomach growled with hunger, but I didn't dare speak up. Instead, I clutched my backpack on my lap, feeling the Hobbit book inside like the only friend left from my old life. I thought about Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit thrust into an unwanted adventure, and wondered if I would find a new home or just more loneliness. Finally, after more than 4 hours, the car turned onto a private road, flanked by white wooden fences and blooming rose bushes. A large iron gate opened automatically, and I gaped as the mansion came into view. It wasn't just a house. It was a palace in the classic American colonial style, with towering white columns, a deep red tiled roof, and an expansive lawn manicured to perfection like a golf course. The garden in the back had a sparkling swimming pool under the afternoon sun, and I caught a glimpse of a garage filled with luxury cars. My heart pounded. This was where Grandfather lived? Alone? Or did he have another family I didn't know about? Grandfather got out of the car first, his movements decisive like a general's. "Come in, Kieran," he said, his deep voice echoing in the quiet air. I followed awkwardly, my dirty sneakers leaving marks on the clean white gravel path. The front door was opened by a middle-aged woman in a neat black and white uniform. Later I learned she was Mrs. Thompson, the housekeeper and cook. She smiled politely at me, but her eyes were full of curiosity, as if I were a strange package delivered to the door. "Hello, young man," she said gently. "I'll prepare your room for you." My room was on the second floor, and when I stepped in, I nearly fell backward in shock. It was twice the size of our old apartment in Baltimore, with a king-size bed covered in pristine white silk sheets, a glossy walnut wardrobe, and a large desk overlooking the garden. On the desk was a classic reading lamp and a few brand-new textbooks. I touched the bedsheet, the softness reminding me of nights sleeping on the old sofa at home, where Mom used to hold me when I was scared of thunder. But now this luxury only made me feel more out of place. I plopped down on the bed, tears streaming down my face. This wasn't my home. This was a strange place where everything was perfectly cold. That evening, the first dinner with Grandfather was a bizarre experience. The long mahogany dining table could seat an entire football team, but it was just the two of us at opposite ends. Mrs. Thompson served grilled steak with fresh salad and crispy toasted bread, dishes I'd never had at home, where dinner was usually boxed pasta or sandwiches. Grandfather ate slowly, his knife and fork clinking softly while I fumbled with my fork, afraid of dropping it. "Kieran," he said suddenly, making me jump. "Starting tomorrow, you'll follow my rules. Wake up at 6 in the morning, breakfast at 6:30, do your homework at the desk, not on the bed. Shoes must be left outside the door." And I'll arrange for you to learn piano, understood? I nodded, though inside I was seething. Rules? Piano? I'd never even touched a piano, and now he wanted me to learn like some spoiled rich kid? But I didn't dare argue. Grandfather's eyes were sharp, as if he was used to people obeying him. After dinner, he led me to the library, a room filled with books from floor to ceiling, with leather chairs and a fireplace, and handed me a notebook. Keep a daily journal. What you do, what you learn, I'll check it. The first few days were hell. I woke up late, and the consequence was no breakfast. The kitchen closed promptly at 7:30, as grandfather had said. I left my shoes inside the house, and Mrs. Thompson shook her head, carrying them out without a word. I deliberately did homework on the bed, and over the weekend grandfather forbade me from going outside to play, even though the vast lawn was inviting. I rebelled in childish ways, throwing books around, screaming into my pillow, even once trying to hide in my room and skip dinner. But grandfather didn't yell. He just looked at me, his voice calm. The consequences are your choice. Disobey and you lose privileges. That coldness scared me more than my father's old beatings. Gradually, I started to adapt, not out of fear, but because I realized his rules brought stability. In Baltimore, life was chaos. Dad coming home late, Mom depressed, meals irregular. Here, everything had a rhythm. Mornings jogging around the yard, studying with the tutor grandfather hired, afternoons learning piano with the strict teacher named Miss Elena. I was clumsy with the keys, my fingers stiff, but each practice session made me feel like I was controlling a small part of my life. One afternoon, when I hit the wrong note for the 10th time, Miss Elena sighed. Kieran, the piano isn't your enemy. Let it tell your story. I thought about my story, being abandoned, loneliness, and for the first time I played a simple melody without mistakes. The first moment of connection came on a stormy night. I sat curled up on the floor of my room, hugging my knees, crying because I missed my parents. The rain pounded against the window like funeral drums, and memories flooded back. Mom singing me to sleep, Dad teaching me to kick a ball in the park. Why did they leave me? Was I such a burden? My sobs echoed in the large room, and then the door opened. Grandfather stepped in, saying nothing, just quietly sitting down in the armchair by the window. He handed me a pristine white handkerchief with delicate lace edges and sat there, looking out at the rain. No words of comfort, no hugs, but his presence was like a windbreak. After a while, I wiped my tears, and he said softly, "Pain is part of life, Kieran, but you're not alone." It was the first time he acknowledged my emotions, and my heart warmed a little. Another time during dinner, I gathered my courage and asked, "Grandpa, why are you so rich and didn't help my parents? I know you're Dad's father, why didn't you?" My voice trailed off. Grandfather set down his knife and fork, his eyes distant. I thought he'd be angry, but he just shook his head. "You'll know later. For now, focus on the present." That answer made me more curious, but it also taught me patience. Grandfather didn't just teach rules, he taught me business. He was the owner of Henry's Home Designs, a high-end interior design company specializing in villas and luxury hotels with branches in multiple states. I started going with him to the office, a modern glass building half an hour's drive from the mansion. I'd sit in the corner of the meeting room watching him negotiate with partners. Once, when a supplier tried to overcharge, Grandfather smiled coldly. "You think I don't know the market price? We can negotiate, but don't try to fool me." I learned how he read body language. The way a partner fidgeted in their seat meant they were hiding something. "Learn, Kieran," he said after the meeting. "Business isn't about money, it's about people. Stay calm and you'll win." Those lessons sank in gradually. I started journaling, not just because he required it, but because I wanted to. Life with Grandfather wasn't mushy love, but it was real. He was there every day, teaching me to stand strong. I still missed my parents, still hurt thinking about them, but that pain now had shape. It motivated me. With Grandfather, I was no longer the abandoned boy. I was Kieran Murphy, learning to build a future. This new life was full of challenges, but also surprises. One morning, grandfather led me to the garage and handed me the keys to a brand new bicycle. "You need exercise," he said curtly. I rode around the neighborhood, the wind in my hair, feeling freedom for the first time in ages. I explored the area, similar large houses, a nearby park with a serene lake, and even a public library where I could borrow books without fear of being chased out. Mrs. Thompson became a silent companion. She told me about grandfather, how he had been a lonely man after grandmother died early, and the company was everything to him. But it wasn't always smooth. I still had nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, calling for Mom. Grandfather never came into the room then, but the next morning, breakfast always included my favorite, homemade waffles, reminiscent of old Christmases. He didn't say anything, but the action spoke for him. I started sharing small things with him, a good test score at the temporary school he enrolled me in, or a piano piece I played flawlessly. He nodded, sometimes flashing a rare smile like winter sunshine. Gradually, the mansion no longer felt strange. I began to see it as home, running on the lawn, reading by the fireplace, even helping Mrs. Thompson in the garden. Grandfather taught me about values. Money comes and goes, Kieran, but discipline lasts forever. I realized he wasn't cold. He was someone who had endured loss, losing his wife, losing his son, and chose to protect himself with a hard shell. And now, he was protecting me in that way. As the years passed, I felt myself changing. From the confused boy in Baltimore, I became a teenager with goals. Grandfather wasn't my parents, but he was the one who stayed, and that was worth more than anything. This new life, though harsh, was forging me into a strong person, and deep down, I knew the journey had only just begun. Everything truly began when my grandfather decided to enroll me in Westwood Academy, a prestigious private school located on the outskirts of Virginia, where children from wealthy families studied with expensive textbooks and sky-high expectations. I clearly remember the morning he announced it as we sat at the breakfast table. He pushed a piece of paper across the table with bold printed letters, "Full scholarship starting in September." I stared at him, mouth agape. "Grandpa, I'm not ready. The public school nearby is fine." But grandfather shook his head, his eyes sharp as knives. "You need challenges, Kieran. Westwood will forge you into someone of value." My first day at Westwood was a nightmare. The school sat on a lush green hill with ancient red brick buildings, vast sports fields, and a library filled with old leather-bound books that carried the faint scent of paper and ink. I walked into class wearing the stiff new uniform, a white shirt, green tie, gray pants, feeling like an outsider. My classmates, kids with their own cars and summer vacations in Europe, looked at me with eyes full of curiosity mixed with pity. "Where are you from?" a boy named Alex asked, his tone like he was talking to an alien. "Baltimore," I muttered, and they giggled, whispering about the slums. The coursework at Westwood was no joke. At my old school, I just needed to memorize to pass, but here, teachers demanded deep analysis, long essays, and group discussions like little philosophers. I struggled with advanced math, where formulas danced on the blackboard like monsters, and American history with tons of dates and names I'd never heard. The pressure from peers was even heavier. They bragged about grades, private tutors, and parents who were lawyers or doctors. I'd come home, sit at my desk until late, my eyes burning under the lamp, wondering if I belonged there. Once, after a disastrous math test, I only got 50 points. I stormed into my room, throwing books everywhere, yelling, "I can't do it. I'm not like them." Grandfather walked in, not yelling, just sitting down in the chair, looking at me with calm eyes. "Circumstances change not by your choice, Kieran," he said slowly, his voice deep like a river. "But your reaction is your choice. You can give up like your father did, or you can fight." His words were like a slap, but also motivation. I didn't want to be like Dad, the one grandfather rarely mentioned, but when he did, it was full of disappointment. From that day, I learned to adapt on my own. I asked the tutor grandfather hired, an old teacher named Mr. Harlan with thick glasses and a warm voice, for extra hours. I formed study groups with a few less arrogant kids like Sarah, the blonde girl who shared her notes, and we'd sit in the library until dark debating Shakespeare or physics formulas. The first few months were so tough that I nearly quit several times, but gradually I improved. My grades rose from D to B, then A. In my third year, my name appeared on the honor roll, hung in the main hallway, and my classmates started respecting me. Alex, the boy who had mocked me, patted my shoulder. "You're really good, Kieran." For the first time, I felt proud, not because of the grades, but because I had chosen to fight, as grandfather said. When it came time to apply for college, the real conflict erupted. I wanted a familiar public school near home, like the University of Maryland, where I could easily visit grandfather and not face too much pressure. I sat at the dinner table pushing the application across. "Grandpa, this school is fine. I don't need the Ivy League." Grandfather looked at me, shaking his head. "You need better than that. Apply to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and at least 4 other top-tier schools." I got angry, arguing back for the first time. "Why do you always push me? I'm not your son for you to fix your mistakes." The atmosphere tensed, knives and forks stopped clinking, and Mrs. Thompson quietly left the kitchen. Grandfather was silent for a long time, his eyes distant, staring into the space between us as if wrestling with memories he had buried deep for years. Then he stood up, his movements slower than usual, and motioned for me to follow him into the study, the familiar room with towering bookshelves, the scent of old wood mixed with faint paper and ink, where he often sat alone on late nights. This time the air was heavier, as if the room held its own secrets. He pulled open the desk drawer with a soft creak, taking out an old photograph, its edges yellowed with time. In the photo, my father as a young man, his long hair blowing in the wind, a radiant smile full of life. Standing close to grandfather, who was younger then, his eyes sparkling with hope, arm around Dad's shoulder like the proudest father in the world. He held the photo, his fingers trembling as they traced my father's face, and his voice rose hoarse and breaking like a river bursting through a dam after years of restraint. "My son. Patrick, your father. He was so talented, smart, quick, could do anything if he wanted. I once dreamed of his future, a boy who would change the world, who would take over everything I built. But at 18, he dropped out of college, chasing pipe dreams, gambling freedom, things that destroyed him slowly. I disowned him because of that, because I couldn't bear to see that talent wasted. I know the value of knowledge, of discipline, things that saved me from poverty. And now, I don't want you to repeat your father's mistakes. You are my second chance." His voice faltered, and then, for the first time in my life, I saw grandfather cry, tears rolling down his stern face, glistening under the desk lamp, like pearls of pain he had never revealed. My father, the one who abandoned me without a goodbye, had once been grandfather's shining hope, had been the boy he loved so much that now, that loss still haunted him. And now, he was placing that hope on my shoulders, not to force me, but to redeem, to save me from Dad's fate, to save himself from eternal regret. I sat there, frozen in the old leather chair, tears streaming uncontrollably, not from anger or resentment, but from a deep, painful understanding mixed with gratitude. Grandfather wasn't cold. He was a father who had lost his son and now using all his remaining strength to protect his grandson, to ensure I wouldn't endure the loneliness he had carried all his life. In that moment, amid the silent bookshelves, we sat together, tears mingling in silence. And I knew that his heart, though tough, was full of love. A silent, sacrificial love that I was only beginning to understand. After that conversation, I agreed to follow his wishes. I applied to 7 Ivy League schools: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, Dartmouth, and Cornell. The waiting process was hell. Months of checking emails, anxiety keeping me up at night. When the acceptance letters came, I was admitted to 5, including Cornell. I chose Cornell for its prestige, excellent business program, and not being too far from Virginia, just a few hours' drive. Grandfather nodded approvingly, but for the first time he hugged me, an awkward but warm embrace. I'm proud of you, Kieran. Life at Cornell was a new world where snow blanketed everything in winter and the vast campus featured ancient stone buildings. I stood out thanks to grandfather's discipline. Waking early, planning my day, and never missing deadlines. I joined the business club where we held idea competitions, and I excelled at product design, inspired by grandfather's interior company. I also joined the marketing club, learning to build brands through simulated campaigns, and even won an award for a project on sustainable interiors. Friends here were diverse, from international students with fascinating stories to rich kids like at Westwood. But now I no longer felt inferior. I had goals to become a worthy successor. Every summer I returned to work at Henry's Home Designs, and those internships were the most practical lessons. In the first year, grandfather pushed me into the warehouse, where I hauled heavy furniture, sweating under fluorescent lights, learning about supply chains and inventory management. Start from the bottom up, Kieran, he said when I complained. To lead, you must understand the employees. The next year, I moved to negotiations, sitting beside grandfather in meetings with suppliers, learning to read body language and make irresistible offers. Once, when a partner tried to hike prices, I interjected, "We can cut 5% if you commit to early delivery." Grandfather looked at me, nodding in approval, and the deal succeeded. In my senior year, I worked in marketing, designing social media ad campaigns using Cornell skills to boost engagement. I grasped the business operations, from designing high-end sofas to negotiating with major hotels. Those summers weren't just work, they were bridges to grandfather. We'd have dinner together, talk about the company, and sometimes he'd share about the past, how he built the company from a small garage after grandmother died. I had nothing but discipline, he said, and I realized I was inheriting not just assets, but that spirit. After graduation, with a bachelor's in business in hand, I returned to the mansion, living with grandfather. He appointed me as the director of marketing for Henry's Home Designs, and for the first time I felt I belonged there. My office was on the second floor, overlooking the garden, and every morning I'd have coffee with grandfather, planning the day. Life was no longer a survival journey. It was one of building. I had grown from an abandoned boy into a man with purpose. But deep down, I knew greater challenges awaited, and they would come sooner than I thought. That challenge arrived on a fall morning, when golden leaves fluttered outside the window and a chill seeped through the cracks in the doors. I was sitting in my office, eyes glued to the computer screen, analyzing data from the new advertising campaign. An idea I had come up with myself, using social media to promote the new line of sustainable furniture. A gentle knock sounded at the door, and grandfather stepped in, still in his familiar gray suit. But today he moved slower, his face slightly pale under the lights. "Kieran," he said, his voice deep but lacking its usual decisiveness. "I need to talk." I stood up, my heart beating a little faster, a sense of unease rising like an undercurrent. Grandfather wasn't one for talks. He acted, he commanded, he taught through example. We sat facing each other at the desk, him holding a cup of coffee but not drinking it, just twirling it in his hands. "I just got the results from the doctor," he said, his eyes meeting mine directly without evasion. "Blood cancer, terminal stage. They say I have about a year, maybe less." His words dropped like an iron weight, heavy and cold. Cancer? Grandfather, the iron-willed man who had built an empire from nothing, who had never been sick a day in his life, was now talking about death as if discussing a failed business deal? I sat frozen, my mouth dry, trying to process the information. "Grandpa, are you sure? We can find another doctor, clinical trials, anything." My voice trembled, but grandfather shook his head, a faint smile crossing his lips, a rare smile full of irony. "I've checked already, Kieran. This isn't about money or willpower, this is reality. I'll face it as always, calmly and with a plan. He spoke as if it were just another project, a negotiation with death. But I saw the fatigue in his eyes, the deeper wrinkles around his mouth, and my heart twisted. Grandfather, the man who had saved me from the abyss, was now facing his own. From that day on, our lives changed, but not in a chaotic way. Grandfather still maintained discipline, and I became part of it. I voluntarily took on managing his schedule, a task he had previously handled with the precision of a Swiss watch. Every morning I brewed coffee on time, reminded him to take his meds, small white pills from plastic bottles, their chemical smell making me nauseous. I drove him to the hospital, sat waiting in the hallway amid the scent of disinfectant and the beeping of machines, my hands clenched around a newspaper I couldn't read a word of. "Eat something, Grandpa," I'd say when he came home exhausted after chemo, and I'd cook light meals myself. Chicken soup simmered with fresh vegetables from the garden, crispy toasted bread with butter. He ate less but always nodded in thanks, his eyes softer, a subtle change that only I noticed. In the first few months, Grandfather still went to work, though slower. I'd see him at his desk, glasses perched low on his nose, reading reports with his familiar focus. But gradually, he began handing over responsibilities like a king preparing to abdicate. It started with small projects. "Kieran, handle the contract with this wood supplier, negotiate the price, but don't concede more than 5%. I'd do it, my heart pounding as I sat in the meeting room facing partners older than me. The first time my voice shook a bit, but I remembered his teaching. Stay calm. Read the other person. The deal succeeded, and the employees started looking at me differently, no longer as the boss's grandson, but as the future leader. They'd nod hello in the hallways, ask for my opinions on strategies, and I felt respect forming gradually, like a hardening shell around me. Grandfather handed over everything bit by bit, from warehouse management to major strategic decisions. "From now on, you'll approve the budgets," he said one afternoon as we sat by the fireplace, the flames crackling cheerfully in contrast to the heavy atmosphere. I hesitated. "Grandpa, I'm not ready." But he placed his hand on my shoulder, his hand thinner than before, veins prominent under thin skin. "You are ready, Kieran. I've seen you grow." Moments like that became more frequent, and once in a rare display of emotion, he said something that choked me up. It was a stormy evening. Him in the armchair, me beside him holding his hand. The hand that had taught me to hold a pen, to play piano. "You are the grandson I never thought I'd have," he whispered, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "I lost my son but found you. You've saved me from loneliness, Kieran." His words flowed through my heart like warm water, erasing the years of coldness. I hugged him, tears streaming, and for the first time I felt the love he had for me. Not through words, but through actions, through this handover. 8 months passed quickly like a fleeting breeze, but each day was a battle. Grandfather weakened gradually, silver hair falling on the pillow, skin pale under the lights, breathing more labored. I was by his side every moment, canceling meetings to stay home, reading books to him. Old business tomes he loved, my voice echoing in the makeshift sick room we set up on the first floor. Mrs. Thompson helped, her eyes red-rimmed as she served meals, but Grandfather maintained his demeanor. "Don't pity me. Focus on the company." And then one dawn morning, as the sun just peeked through the curtains, he passed peacefully. I sat by the bed holding his hand, feeling the last warmth fade. No drama, no final words. Just a gentle departure as he had lived. In control. The funeral was small as he had instructed, only close partners, loyal employees, and a few distant relatives I'd never met. Rain pattered on the walnut coffin, the wood he favored in interior designs, and I stood there under a black umbrella, tears mingling with the rain. When everyone left, I knelt by the grave, whispering, "Thank you, Grandpa." Grandfather Henry was the only one who never abandoned me, the man who built me from ashes into a strong man. He taught me not just business, but life, with discipline, with purpose, and with silent love. The handover wasn't just the company. It was his legacy now in my hands. And though painful, I knew I had to continue. For him, for myself. The days after the funeral were a heavy silence, as if the vast mansion now felt emptier than ever. I wandered through the hallways, touching the furniture that grandfather had designed himself, the old leather chair in the study where he used to sit reading late into the night, or the long dining table where we shared quiet but meaningful dinners. The scent of walnut wood still lingered faintly, but there were no more decisive footsteps from him. Mrs. Thompson was still there, quietly cleaning, her eyes red-rimmed whenever she mentioned him. "Master, he was so proud of you," she said once, handing me a cup of hot tea. I nodded, but inside the loss felt like a bottomless pit. The company kept running thanks to the foundations grandfather had left, but I felt like I was walking a tightrope, trying to balance between grief and responsibility. Then came the will reading just 2 weeks after the funeral. Lawyer Thompson, not the housekeeper Mrs. Thompson, but Mr. James Thompson, a tall, thin man with thick glasses and a voice as even as reading a financial report, scheduled me at his office in the city center. The office was in a modern glass building with black leather chairs and the smell of freshly printed papers. I arrived alone, wearing a gray suit like the ones grandfather often wore, feeling like I was stepping into an important business meeting. Mr. Thompson greeted me with a firm handshake, leading me into a small conference room where a long wooden table and a few chairs awaited. "We'll begin right away," he said, his tone professional. I sat down, my heart beating a bit faster, not knowing what grandfather had arranged. He had never revealed the details of the will, only saying, "You'll know when the time is right." Then the conference room door opened and I froze. My father, Patrick, walked in, followed by my mother, Fiona. They appeared uninvited, their faces older than I remembered, with deep wrinkles and graying hair, wearing a strange smugness. Dad was in a worn jacket, the faint smell of tobacco lingering, while Mom wore an outdated long dress, her eyes sparkling with false hope. "Kieran," Mom said, her voice sweet like spoiled honey, trying to smile. "Son, we saw your grandfather's obituary in the paper. We came to offer condolences." I sat motionless, blood rushing to my ears. They saw the obituary? They had been watching from afar, waiting for this moment. After 15 years of abandoning me, they showed up like vultures smelling meat. I nodded coldly, saying nothing, my eyes turning to Mr. Thompson, who raised an eyebrow in surprise but quickly regained his composure. The reading began. Mr. Thompson opened the sealed envelope, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "According to the will of Mr. Henry Murphy, the entire estate is bequeathed to his grandson Kieran Murphy, including the mansion valued at approximately $1.8 million, $2 million in cash, and 70% of the shares in Henry's Home Designs, estimated at $45 million. The figures rang out like thunder, but I wasn't surprised. Grandfather had hinted at this in his final months. My parents, on the other hand, their eyes lit up, Dad squeezing Mom's hand as if they'd won the lottery. But Mr. Thompson wasn't done. He continued evenly. "Mr. Henry legally adopted Kieran when he was 16, therefore Kieran is the sole heir. Any other blood relatives have no standing to contest." The atmosphere in the room shifted abruptly. Mom's mouth gaped open, her face paling. "Adopted? But we're his biological parents." Dad slammed the table, growling, "What did that old man do?" "We have rights." I sat still, my heart pounding, but feeling as if grandfather was by my side, protecting me from beyond the grave. Mr. Thompson raised his hand, calm. Mr. Henry left evidence, emails and recordings, showing that Mr. Patrick and Mrs. Fiona had extorted him multiple times, demanding financial support without caring for Kieran. And there's a nuclear clause. If anyone contests the will, particularly Mr. Patrick, the entire estate will transfer to the American Childhood Cancer Foundation. His words exploded like a bomb, plunging the room into deadly silence. My parents' faces turned ashen, their eyes darting like cornered animals. I looked at them, old pain resurfacing, the note from when I was 13 now burning like a fresh scar. They didn't give up easily. After the reading, as we left the office, Mom grabbed my arm in the hallway, her voice trembling. "Kieran, son, we need to talk. We've had such hard times. Debt's piling up, your dad has heart problems, and my depression is worse. Just share a small portion. We're family." Dad interjected, his pleading tone fake. "You're rich now. You can't leave your parents destitute, can you? We made mistakes, but we can fix it now." I stopped, looking straight into their eyes, the eyes that once saw me as a burden. "Fix it," I said, my voice cold but trembling with anger. "You abandoned me at 13 with a scrap of paper and not a single call. Grandfather saved me, taught me to live. You're not family. You're the past." I yanked my arm away, walking off without looking back, my heart pounding chaotically, a mix of pain and liberation. But they didn't stop. A few days later, I received a letter from their lawyer, a cheap one, demanding to contest the will, threatening to sue and trigger the nuclear clause, causing the entire estate to go to charity if they weren't given a share. I sat at my desk, reading it over and over, my heart constricting. Were they playing a "if I can't have it, no one can" game? Wanting to drag me into the abyss with them out of hatred or desperation? But I quickly realized it was just a bluff. With the extortion evidence Grandfather left, old emails and clear recordings, any lawsuit would backfire on them. They could face criminal charges for extortion and child abandonment in the past. I believed my parents wouldn't have the courage or resources to pursue it. Then one evening, as I sat in the study reviewing company reports under the warm desk lamp, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Thompson went to answer, and her call echoed. "Master, they've come in." I ran out, seeing my parents barging into the foyer, Dad shoving Mrs. Thompson aside, Mom looking around the mansion with greedy eyes. "Kieran, we need to talk," Dad said loudly, his face flushed. They had violated the restraining order Grandfather had obtained from the court when I was 16, to protect me. I calmly called the police, gripping the phone tightly. "There's an intruder in my home." My parents started yelling, Mom sobbing, "Son, don't do this, we're blood." But I stood there watching them being dragged away by the police, the sirens echoing into the night. That was the last time I saw them up close. The resolution came swiftly. With Grandfather's evidence, old emails, recorded extortion calls, the court dismissed their claims. They left empty-handed, vanishing from my life as they had 15 years before. I reinforced the restraining order, installed additional security cameras around the mansion, and hired a lawyer to monitor if they returned. The pain was still there like an old wound, but it no longer controlled me. Grandfather had prepared everything, even from beyond the grave, to protect the legacy, and to protect me. I sat at his desk, holding the photo of my father that he had once shown me, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa." The confrontation ended, but my journey had only just begun. With the strength from Grandfather, I was ready to face anything. However, despite my determination to let go, a part of me was still curious and uneasy about them, the people who were once my parents. I couldn't let the past hang like a lingering ghost, so I secretly hired a private investigator, a middle-aged man with a clean record and experience in discreet surveillance. "Find out everything about Patrick and Fiona Murphy," I told him over the phone, my voice calm but my heart pounding. "Their current address, financial situation, health, illnesses, everything. Don't let them know." The investigator worked quickly, sending an encrypted email report after 2 weeks. They were living in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of Philadelphia, a moldy place with stained walls and the constant rumble of trucks through the night. My father was still addicted to gambling, doing odd jobs at a local casino with debts piling up to hundreds of thousands of dollars from underground lenders. My mother, Fiona, had worsened depression, bedridden for days at a time, while Dad's heart condition was deteriorating, relying on cheap medications from community clinics. They were scraping by with hasty meals from canned food, no friends, no hope. A life they had used as an excuse to come back demanding a share of the inheritance. That report left me sitting in silence for a long time, under the warm desk lamp in the study, my hands clenching the printed pages. They were truly struggling, not lying to manipulate. Old anger resurfaced, mixed with a touch of pity, not love, but the compassion grandfather had taught me. Act with integrity, Kieran, even toward enemies. I decided to confront them one last time, not to forgive, but to end it cleanly. I contacted them through my lawyer, arranging a meeting at a neutral coffee shop with its old wooden tables and the faint aroma of roasted coffee. They arrived, their faces gaunt, eyes sparkling with hope upon seeing me. Now a successful man in a neat suit, no longer the trembling 13-year-old boy. "Kieran," Mom said, her voice trembling, hands gripping her coffee cup tightly. "Son, we know you're angry, but we need help." Dad nodded, eyes averted. "The debts are killing us, son." I looked at them, maintaining composure like grandfather in negotiations. "I know your situation, debts, illnesses, everything. I'll help, pay off the debts, cover medical costs, even support a new place to live. But there are conditions." They sat up straight, eyes lighting up, but I continued firmly. "First, sign a legal contract. Never contest grandfather's estate again, no approaching me or the mansion without permission. Second, Dad must quit gambling, join a rehab program I choose with monthly reports. Mom must get regular depression treatment with doctors I arrange. Third, you must live by rules. Disciplined spending, weekly financial logs sent to my lawyer. Non-compliance and the support stops immediately. This isn't pity, it's a chance for you to save yourselves as grandfather taught me." They hesitated, Dad muttering something about it being too harsh. But in the end, they signed the agreement because they had no choice. That's how I learned from grandfather. Integrity isn't giving freely, discipline is the key to change. With that chapter closed, I threw myself into work as a way to heal. Henry's Home Designs became the center of my life, not just a company, but a living testament to grandfather's legacy. I took over completely, sitting in his old office, the room with the glossy mahogany desk, bookshelves filled with his handwritten notebooks, and the faint scent of old wood still lingering like a reminder that he was still here. The employees eyed me skeptically at first, whispering in the hallways, "Can he do it?" Mr. Henry was a legend. I knew I had to prove myself, not with words, but with actions, just as grandfather taught. I started by restructuring operations, changes grandfather had hinted at in our final conversations. First, cutting underperforming products, outdated sofa lines with non-competitive quality that grandfather had kept out of sentiment for old suppliers. I called a company-wide meeting, standing before the team of 50 in the large glass conference room, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "We have to move forward. These products no longer fit. We'll focus on sustainable modern interiors." There were murmurs of opposition, but I presented data from my marketing campaigns, sales down 20% on the old lines, and they nodded. Next, fixing the shipping system previously plagued by delays due to reliance on external contractors. I negotiated new contracts, personally calling logistics companies, remembering grandfather's words, "Read the other person, even over the phone." The result? Delivery times dropped from 2 weeks to 3 days, and customers started praising us on social media. Then I upgraded e-commerce, a field grandfather hadn't reached due to his illness. I hired a team of young programmers, transforming the outdated website into a modern platform with 3D images, virtual furniture trials, and AI product recommendations. Late nights, I'd sit at the desk, the computer screen illuminating my tired face, testing the new interface, feeling like grandfather was looking over my shoulder. Revenue skyrocketed, doubling in the first year from $20 million to $40 million. I opened 2 new stores as per grandfather's plans, one in New York with a gleaming glass facade overlooking the bustling street, and one in Chicago, where the interiors were displayed like an art gallery. The employees began to trust me. They came to my office with ideas, patted my shoulder in the hallways, and once, the head of production said, "You're doing great, Kieran. Mr. Henry would be proud." Those words were like medicine, erasing the sleepless nights of anxiety, wondering if I was worthy. But grandfather's legacy wasn't just the company, it was more personal, deeper things. One rainy afternoon while cleaning the study, his favorite room with the fireplace still holding ashes from his last sit, I found a small locked wooden box hidden deep in the desk drawer. The box was made of walnut, intricately carved, and the key was in the letter he left for me in the will. I opened it, hands trembling. Inside was a handwritten letter, his script steady even at the end. "Kieran, believe in yourself. Don't wait for miracles. Build better than I did. Henry." Those simple words pierced straight into my heart, tears streaming as I sat there amid the old books. He didn't leave mushy words, just commands but full of love. Commands to surpass him, not just copy. Through it all, I realized a profound truth. True family isn't blood, but those who stay during the hardest times. My parents, the blood relatives, had shrunk in the face of adversity, abandoning me like a burden. Grandfather, though not closely related by blood, had stayed, forging me through harsh discipline and silent love. I continued to grow the company, living by the values he taught: action over dreams, discipline over indulgence, wholehearted rather than half-hearted. Every decision, from opening new branches to designing products, echoed his words. Some people grow when they lose power. Your parents shrank. You must grow. And I am growing every day. The company is no longer just Henry's home designs. It's our legacy far beyond what he handed over. I sit at the dining table alone, looking out at the garden where he once taught me to mow the lawn, and smile. Life isn't perfect. Loneliness still visits on late nights. But I have purpose. I have built from the ashes, and that journey will continue with grandfather forever by my side in my heart.